this is Hera and welcome to another new Hera podcast. In this episode, we are talking about the ghosts. The ghosts in folklore. A ghost is something known as apparition, haunt, phantom, poltergeist, shade, spirit, spook, and wraith. And this is the soul or a spirit of a dead person or animal that can appear to the living. In ghost lore, descriptions of ghosts vary widely from an invisible presence to translucent or barely visible wispy shapes to realistic lifelike forms. The deliberate attempt to contact the spirit of a deceased person is known as a necromancy, or in Spiritism as a seance. The belief in the existence of an afterlife, as well as in the manifestations of the spirits of the dead, is widespread, dating back to the animism or ancestors' worship in pre-literal cultures. Certain religious practices, funeral rites, exorcisms, and some practices of spiritualism and ritual magic are specifically designed to raise the spirits of dead. Ghosts are generally described as solitary, human-like essence. True stories of ghostly armies and the ghosts of animals rather than humans have also been recounted. They are believed to haunt particular locations, objects, or people they were associated with in life. According to a 2009 study by the Pew Research Center, 18% of Americans say they have seen a ghost. The overwhelming consensus of science is that ghosts do not exist. Their existence is impossible to falsify, and ghost hunting has been classified as pseudoscience. Despite centuries of investigations, there is no scientific evidence that any location is inhabited by spirits of the dead. Historically, certain toxic and psychoactive plants, whose use has long been associated with necromancy and the underworld, have been shown to certain antihalogenic compounds that are pharmacologically linked to dementia, as well as histological patterns of neurodegeneration. Common prescriptions medications such as sleep aids may in rare instances cause ghost-like hallucinations. Older reports link carbon monoxide poisoning to ghost-like hallucinations. More recent research has indicated that ghost sightings may be related to degenerative brain disease such as Alzheimer's disease. The next anthropological context of ghosts, further information, animism, ancestor worship, origin of religion, and anthropology of religion, a notion of the transcendent, supernatural, or numinous, usually involving entities like ghosts, demons, or deities, is cultural and universal. In pre-literate folk religion, these beliefs are often summarized under animism and ancestor worship. Some people believe the ghost or spirit never leaves Earth until there is no one left to remember the one who died. In many cultures, malignant, restless ghosts are distinguished from the more benign spirits involved in ancestor worship. Ancestor worship typically involves rites intended to prevent revenge. Vengeful spirits of death imagined as starving and envious of the living. Strategies for preventing revenge may either include sacrifice, giving the dead food and drink to pacify them, or magical banishment of the deceased to force them not to return. Ritual feeding of the dead is performed in traditions like the Chinese Ghost Festival or the Western All Souls Day. Magical banishment of the dead is present in many of the world's burial customs. The bodies found in many tumuli had been ritually bound before burial, and the custom of binding of the dead persists, for example, in rural Anatolia. 19th century anthropologist James Frazer stated in his classic work The Golden Bough that souls were seen as the creature within that animated the body. Ghosts in the afterlife. For soul, psychologic, underworld, hungry ghost, and psychopomp. Ghost Festival, All Souls Day, Day of the Dead, and a Ghost Dance. Although the human soul was sometimes symbolically or literally depicted in Asian cultures as a bird or other animal, it appears to have been widely held that the soul was an exact reproduction of the body in every feature, even down to the clothing the person wore. This is depicted in artwork from various Asian cultures, including such works as Egyptian Book of the Dead, which shows deceased people in the afterlife appearing much as they did before death, including the style of dress. Fear of ghosts. While deceased ancestors are universally regarded as venerable and often believed to have a continued presence in some form of afterlife, the spirit of a deceased person that persists in the material world is regarded as an unnatural or undesirable state of affairs, and the idea of ghosts or irreverence is associated with a reaction of fear. This is universally the case in pre-modern folk cultures, but fear of ghosts also remains an integral aspect of the modern ghost story, gothic horror, and other horror fiction dealing with the supernatural. Common attributes. Another widespread belief concerning ghosts is that they are composed of a mystified, airy, or subtle material. Anthropologists link this idea to early beliefs that ghosts were in person within the person's spirit, most noticeably in Asian cultures as a person's breath, which upon exhaling in colder climates appears visibly as a white mist. This belief may have also fostered the metaphorical meaning of bread in certain languages, such as the Latin spiritus and the Greek pneuma, which by analogy became extended to mean the soul. In the Bible, God is depicted as synthesizing Adam as a living soul from the dust of the earth and the breath of God. In many traditional accounts, ghosts were often thought to be deceased people looking for vengeance, vengeful ghosts, or imprisoned on earth for bad things they did during life. The appearance of a ghost has often been regarded as an omen or portent of death. Seeing one's own ghostly double or fetch is a related omen of death. White ladies were reported to appear in many rural areas and supposed to have died tragically or suffered trauma in life. White lady legends are found around the world. Common to many of them is the theme of losing a child or husband and a sense of purity, as opposed to the lady in red ghost that is mostly attributed to the jilted lover or prostitute. The white lady ghost is often associated with an individual family line or regarded as a harbinger of death, similar to a banshee. Legends of ghost ships have existed since the 18th century. Most notable of these is the Flying Dutchman. This theme has been used in literature in the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner by Coleridge. Ghosts are often depicted as being covered in a shroud or dragging chains. Ancient Near East and Egypt. There are many references to ghosts in Mesopotamian religions, the religions of Sumer, Babylon, Assyria, and other early states in Mesopotamia. Traces of these beliefs survive in the later Abrahamic religions that came to dominate the region. Ghosts were thought to be created at the time of death, taking on the memory and personality of a dead person. They traveled to the netherworld. They were assigned a position and led an existence similar in some ways to that of the living. Relatives of the dead were accepted to make offerings of food and drink to the dead to ease their conditions. If they did not, the ghost could inflict misfortune and illness on the living. Traditional healing practices ascribed a variety of illnesses to the action of ghosts, while others were caused by gods or demons. There was widespread belief in ghosts in ancient Egyptian culture. The Hebrew Bible contains a few references to ghosts associating spiritism with forbidden occult activities. The most notable reference is in the first book of Samuel, in which a disguised King Saul has the witch of Endor summon the spirit or ghost of Samuel. The soul and the spirit were believed to exist after death, with the ability to assist or harm the living, and the possibility of a second death over a period of more than 2,500 years, Egyptian beliefs about the nature of the afterlife evolved constantly. Many of those beliefs were recorded in hieroglyph inscriptions, papyrus scrolls, and tomb paintings. The Egyptian Book of the Dead compiles some of the beliefs from different periods of ancient Egyptian history. In modern times, the fanciful concept of a mummy coming back to life and wreaking vengeance when disturbed has spawned a whole genre of horror stories and films. Classical antiquity. Ghosts appear in Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, in which they were described as vanishing as a vapor, gibbering and winning into the earth. Homer's ghost had little interaction with the world of the living. Periodically they were called upon to provide advice or prophecy, but they do not appear to be particularly feared. Ghosts in the classical world often appeared in the form of vapor or smoke, but at other times they were described as being substantial, appearing as they had been at the time of death, complete with the wounds that killed them. By the 5th century BC, classical Greek ghosts had become hunting, frightening creatures who could work to either good or evil purposes. The spirit of the dead was believed to hover near the resting place of the corpse, and cemeteries were places the living avoided. The dead were to be ritually mourned through public ceremonies, sacrifice, and liberations, or else they might return to haunt their families. The ancient Greeks held an annual feast to honor and placate the spirits of the dead, for which the family ghosts were invited, and after which they were firmly invited to live until the same time next year. In the 5th century BC, play Ortesia includes an appearance of the ghost of Clemenstra, one of the first ghosts to appear in a work of fiction. Roman Empire and late antiquity. The ancient Romans believed a ghost could be used to exact revenge on an enemy by scratching a course on a piece of lead or pottery and placing it into a grave. Plutarch in the 1st century AD described the haunting of the baths at Chaeronea by the ghost of a murdered man. The ghost's loud and frightful groans caused the people of the town to seal up the doors of the building. Another celebrated account of a haunted house from the ancient classical world is given by Pliny the Younger. Pliny describes the haunting of a house in Athens, which was bought by the Stoic philosopher Athenodorus, who lived about 100 years before Pliny. Knowing that the house was supposedly haunted, Athenodorus intentionally set up his writing desk in the room where the apparition was said to appear and sat there writing until late at night, when he was disturbed by a ghost bound in chains. He followed the ghost outside where it indicated a spot on the ground. When Athenodorus later excavated the area, shackled skeleton was unearthed. The haunting ceased when the skeleton was given a proper burial. The writers Plautus and Lucian also wrote stories about haunted houses. In the New Testament, according to Luke, following his resurrection, Jesus was forced to persuade the disciples that he was not a ghost. Some versions of Bible, such as KJV and NKJV, use the term spirit. Similarly, Jesus' followers at first believed he was a ghost when they saw him walking on water. One of the first persons to express this belief in ghosts was Lucian of Samosata in the 2nd century AD. In his satirical novel The Lover of Lies, he relates how Democritus, the learned man from Abdera in Thrace, lived in a tomb outside the city gates to prove that cemeteries were not haunted by the spirits of the departed. Lucian relates how he persisted in his this belief, despite practical jokes perpetrated by some young men of Abdera, who dressed up in black robes with skull masks to frighten him. This account by Lucian notes something about the popular classical expectation of how a ghost should look. In the 5th century AD, the Christian priest Constantinus of Lyon recorded an instance of the recurring theme of an improperly buried dead who come back to haunt the living, who can only cease their haunting when their bones have been discovered and properly reburied. In Middle Ages, ghosts reported in medieval Europe tended to fall into two categories: the soul of the dead or demons. The soul of the dead returned for a specific purpose. Demonic ghosts existed only to torment or tempt the living. The living could tell them apart by demanding their purpose in the name of Jesus Christ. The soul of a dead person would divulge its mission, while demonic ghosts would be banished at the sound of the holy name. Most ghosts were souls assigned to purgatory, condemned for a specific period to atone for their transgressions in life. Their penance was generally related to their sin. For example, the ghost of a man who had been abusive to his servants was commanded to tear off and swallow bits of his own tongue. The ghost of another man who had neglected to leave his cloth to the poor was condemned to wear the cloak. Now heavy as such as a church tower, these ghosts appeared to the living to ask for prayers to end their suffering. Other dead souls returned to urge the living to confess their sins before their own deaths. Medieval European ghosts were more substantial than ghosts described in the Victorian age, and there are accounts of ghosts being wrestled when a physically restrained until a priest could arrive to hear its confession. Some were less solid and could move through walls. Often they were described as paler and sadder version of the person they had been while alive, and dressed in tattered grey rags. The vast majority of reported sightings were male. There were some reported cases of ghostly armies fighting battles at night in the forest or in the remains of an Iron Age hill fort, as a Wembley near Cambridge, England. Living knights were sometimes challenged to single combat by phantom knights, which vanished when defeated. From medieval period, an apparition of a ghost is recorded from 1211, a time of the Albigensian Crusade. Gervase of Tilbury, Marshal of Earls, wrote that the image of Wilhelm, a boy recently murdered in the forest, appeared in his cousin's home in Beaucaire, near Avignon. This series of visits lasted all of the summer. Through his cousin, who spoke for him, the boy allegedly held conversation with anyone who wished, until the local priest requested to speak to the boy directly, leading to extended discussions on theology. The boy narrated the trauma of death and the unhappiness of his fellow souls in purgatory, and reported that God was most pleased with the ongoing crusade against the Carter heretics. Launched 3 years earlier, the time of the Albigensian Crusade in southern France was marked by intense and prolonged warfare, this constant bloodshed and dislocation of populations being the constants for this reported visit by the murdered boy. Haunted houses are featured in the 19th century Arabian Nights, such as the tale of Ali the Kairan and the haunted house in Baghdad. European Renaissance to Romanticism. Renaissance magic took a revived interest in the occult, including necromancy in the era of the Reformation and Counter-Reformation. Thus, there was frequently a backlash against unwholesome interest in the dark arts, typified by writers such as Thomas Eratus. The Swiss Reformed pastor Ludwig Lavater supplied one of the most frequently reprinted books of the period with his Of Ghosts and Spirits Walking by Night. The child ballad Sweet William Ghosts accounts the story of a ghost returning to his fiancée, begging her to free him from his promise to marry her. He cannot marry her because he is dead, but her refusal would mean his damnation. This reflects a popular British belief that the dead haunted their lovers if they took up with a new love without some formal release. Unquiet Grave expresses a belief even more widespread. Found in various locations over Europe, ghosts can stem from excessive grief of the living, whose mourning interferes with the dead's peaceful rest. In many folk tales from around the world, the hero arranges to the burial of a dead man. Soon after, he gains a companion who aids him, and in the end, the hero's companion reveals that he is in fact the dead man. In instances of this include the Italian fairy tale Fair Bro and the Swedish The Bird Grip. Modern period of Western culture. Spiritualist movement is a monolithic belief system or religion postulating a belief in God, but with a distinguished feature of belief that spirits of the dead residing in the spirits world can be contacted by mediums who can then provide information about the afterlife. Spiritualism developed in the United States and reached its peak growth in membership from the 1840s to the 1920s, especially in English language countries. By 1897, it was said to have more than 8 million followers in the United States and Europe, mostly drawn from the middle and upper classes, while the corresponding movement in continental Europe and Latin America is known as Spiritism. The religion flourished for a half century without canonical text or formal organization, attaining cohesion by periodicals, sourced by trance lectures, camp meetings, and the missionary activities of accomplished mediums. Many prominent spiritualists were women. Most welfare supported causes such as the abolition of slavery and women's suffrage. By the late 1880s, credibility of the informal movement weakened due to accusations of fraud among mediums, and formal spiritualism organizations began to appear. Spiritualism is currently practiced primarily through various denominational spiritualist churches in the United States and the United Kingdom. Spiritism, or French spiritualism, is based on the 5 books of the Spiritist Confidation written by French educator Hippolyte Léon Denisard Rivali under the pseudonym Allan Kardec, reporting seances in which he observed a series of phenomena that he attributed to incorporeal intelligence. His assumptions of spirit communication was validated by many contemporaries, among them many scientists and philosophers who attended seances and studied by phenomena. His work was later extended by writers like Leon Denis, Arthur Conan Doyle, Camille Flammarion, Ernesto Bozano, Chico Xavier, Divaldo Pereira Franco, Valdo Vieira, Johannes Graeber, and others. Spiritualism has adherents in many countries throughout the world, including Spain, United States, Canada, Japan, Germany, France, England, Argentina, Portugal, and especially Brazil, which has the largest population and greatest number of followers. From the scientific view, physicist John Ferrier wrote an essay towards the theory of apparitions in 1813, in which he argued that sightings of ghosts were the result of optical illusions. Later, the French physicist Alexandre Jacques-François Bruyère de Boismont published on hallucinations, or the rational history of apparitions, dreams, ecstasy, magnetism, and somnambulism in 1845, in which he claimed sightings of ghosts were the result of hallucinations. In Thailand, ghosts in Thailand are part of local folklore and have now become part of the popular culture of the country. Phraya Numan Rajadon was the first Thai scholar who seriously studied Thai folk beliefs and took notes of the nocturnal village spirits of Thailand. He established that since such spirits were not represented in paintings or drawings, they were purely based on descriptions of popular orally transmitted traditional stories. Therefore, most of the contemporary iconography of ghosts such as Nang Tani, Nang Takian, Kresue, Krahang, Fihuakat, Fifop, Fipong, Fifraya, and Maenak has its origins in Thai films that have now become classics. The most feared spirit in Thailand is Phai Tai Hong, the ghost of a person who has died suddenly of a violent death. The folklore of Thailand also includes the belief that sleep paralysis is caused by a ghost, Thiam. In modern era, 1920 to 1970, professional parapsychologists and ghost hunters such as Harry Price, active in the 1920s and the 1930s, and Peter Underwood, active in 1940s and 1950s, published accounts of their experience with ostensibly true ghost stories such as Price, the most haunted house in England, and Underwood's ghost of Borley. The writer Frank Edwards delved into ghost stories in his books of his, like Stranger Than Science. Children's Benevolent ghost stories became popular, such as Casper the Friendly Ghost, created in the 1930s and appearing in comics, animated cartoons, and eventually a 1995 feature film. With the advent of motion pictures and television, screen depictions of ghosts became common and spanned a variety of genres. The works of Shakespeare, Dickens, and Wilde have all been made into cinematic versions. Novel-length tales have been difficult to adapt to cinema, although that of The Haunting of Hill House to The Haunting in 1963 is an exception. Sentimental depictions during this period were more popular in cinema than horror, and include the 1947 film The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, which was later adapted to television with a successful 1968 to 70 TV series. Genuine psychological horror films from his period include 1944's The Uninvited and 1945's Dead of Night. In postmoderna in 1970 to the present, the 1970s saw screen depictions of ghosts diverge into distinct genres of the romantic and horror. A common theme in the romantic genre from this period is the ghost as a Benjin guide or messenger, often with unfinished business, such as 1989's Field of Dreams, the 1990 film Ghost, and the 1993 comedy Heart and Souls. In the horror genre, 1980's The Fog and the Eighth Nightmare on Elm Street series of films from the 1980s and the 1990s are notable examples of the trend for the merging of ghost stories with scenes of physical violence. Popularized in such films as the 1984 comedy Ghostbusters, ghost hunting became a hobby for many who formed ghost hunting societies to explore reportedly haunted places. The ghost hunting theme has been featured in reality television series such as Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters International, Ghost Lab, Most Haunted, and The Haunting. It is also represented in children television by such programs as The Ghost Hunter and The Ghost Trackers. Ghost hunting also gave rise to multiple guidebooks to haunted locations and the ghost hunting how-to manuals. The 1990s saw a return to classic gothic ghosts whose danger were more psychological than physical. Examples of films from this period include 1990s The Sixth Sense and the others. Asian cinema has also produced horror films about ghosts, such as 1998 Japanese film Ringu and the Pang Brothers 2002 film The Eye. Indian ghost movies are popular not just in India but in the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and other parts of the world. Some Indian ghost movies, such as the comedy horror film Chandramukhi, have been commercial successes dubbed into several languages. In fictional television programming, ghosts have been explored in series such as Supernatural, Ghost Whisperers, and Medium. In animated fictional television programming, ghosts have served as the central element in series such as Casper the Friendly Ghost, Danny Phantom, and Scooby-Doo. Various other television shows have depicted ghosts as well. So, this is all about the ghosts. You'll find out the history also about the ghost and what are the ghosts are, and see you in another episode. Bye.